Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscription Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. Our guest today is Danny Taing, who is the CEO and founder of Bokksu. Danny, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Happy to be here.
Yeah, excited to learn more here. As I was telling you a second ago, Japan is one of those places I've never been. So, something that gives you a taste of the culture there sounds pretty interesting. So, tell us what Bokksu is and how you came to found it.
Sure. Bokksu is kind of a lot of things, but right now the main thing is it's a subscription box for kind of discovering and tasting authentic Japanese snack foods. Kind of our whole premise is we're directly partnering with these centuries-old family snack maker businesses throughout Japan. These are it kind of goes beyond Pocky, beyond Japanese Kit Kats. It's kind of like Hokkaido red bean buns, Kyoto matcha cakes, etc. And we source them directly in Japan. Our boxes are packed there as well, and then it ships directly to customers' doors in about 100 countries around the world. And so it's a there's no other kind of product like this. And I started it around almost 6 years ago now.
6 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So what led you to start a box of Japanese goods and candies?
Yeah. So I've been back in New York City for 8 years now, but before I moved back, I was living in Japan for 4 years. So
Okay.
I was living in Tokyo. I was kind of studying Japanese there for a bit, but then mostly working and living there. And during the 4 years I was living there, I got to travel throughout the country, eat a lot of these amazing, like regionally limited food and snacks. And I was like things I'd never seen before, things you
Mm,
can't even find in Tokyo sometimes. Like it's very kind of
mm,
limited to the specific towns or cities, or there's this big kind of culture of kind of seasonality and kind of a kind of like family business, like local type of eating that happens in Japan. And
yep.
so, I just loved it so much. And when I moved back to the States, I lost access to all of that. I brought back a good amount of the snacks in my suitcases. And then when I like kind of shared it with friends, everybody went crazy for them. And so I was like, wait, there's like potentially something here. Like, why do these things not exist? Is there a way I can create something that will connect kind of Japan with the rest of the world? And like kind of the Baksu kind of eventually percolated up as an idea. I concepted in late 2015, and in early 2016, kind of did like a small little beta run, just really test out the concept. Got a lot of great feedback, and then kind of officially like bootstrap launched in April 2016 to about 40 subscribers, most of which were like friends supporting me at that time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds familiar. Yep. So you didn't have this idea while you were in Japan. This is something that came up after you came back.
Yeah, yeah. It was Boxing in some ways is kind of a culmination of a lot of the random life skills and experiences I had after like in college. I went to Stanford. I'd studied like psychology and Japanese, and then after I graduated, I worked at Google doing like AdWords and digital marketing. So that's where I first got learned about e-commerce and kind of how to do a little marketing online. But after just about a year, that's when I quit and moved to Tokyo. And then having lived there, and then when I moved back, I studied computer science and one of the kind of post-bac programs here. And so then like I knew how to web develop, I knew about Japanese language, food and culture, and I knew some digital marketing. So I was like,
Yeah.
let me give this a shot by
Yeah.
myself. Um, and so like it was kind of like it kind of built up over time. And because I'd
Yeah.
also lived, I had like friends there and connections, and was able to like source these things that are normally very
Mhm.
difficult to source. Like some of these family businesses don't speak English. Some of them have never even left Japan before. And so
Yeah.
unless you can be fluent in the language and culture, then it would be a little difficult to get some of these relationships.
Yeah, you hear the phrase like someone's uniquely positioned to start a company. I think that certainly applies to you, the way all of that kind of came together there.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly helped me. Given that I had no external funding at first, it was very necessary that I could just rely on me, as lonely as it was. There was like nobody else that could pay to really do anything.
Yeah. Well, since you started it after you had come back and didn't have the idea when you were there, now you've got logistics issues to deal with. So talk a little bit about that, how you started,
Yeah.
getting this network set up. And you said it's packed in Japan as well, right? Before it comes over, you prepare the boxes. So there's a lot happening over there.
Yeah, I mean, so the whole logistics of it has been a huge undertaking and an evolution over time. So
Mhm.
in the very beginning, I was packing the boxes myself in New York City, obviously, because there's no way I had the volume to be able to work with any type of fulfillment partner at that point.
Yeah.
And so at the very start, that was one of the hardest things to do, was figure out the logistics of it. So in the very beginning, it was stuff I brought back in my suitcases from Japan. Obviously, not a scalable, sustainable way of doing it, but then to get the really Japan exclusive limited items, that was kind of the only way I knew how at first. And then I would kind of bring it over and I would pack it, and it was only shipping in the US at the beginning, just shipping from my apartment in New York City. And
Mhm.
as we scaled up, of course, that became a little bit untenable as well. And we started like then shipping product over from Japan. Like I literally had a friend's apartment that I would ship some of the stuff to. He would repack it into larger master cartons and then bring it to the Japan post office and then express mail it to me. I owe him many, many dinners. And it was like that type of scrappy beginnings. And when actually that, and then we eventually found like a kind of like a mail forwarding type of service in Japan
Yeah.
that we can just send it to, and that, they charge a little bit, but then obviously now when it gets bigger, it got harder. And then we kind of continued this path for about up to 500 subscribers, where we would have things shipped over. We got some kind of like rental space here in the New York City area, and actually, it soon outgrew my apartment as well. It was like snacks overflowing from my closets. It was just getting out of control. And so, um, so we then started packing at the space once a month, and I had like a couple of part timers at that point. But then soon we outgrew that, where we just couldn't pack anymore. It just was taking up too much time. That's when we started looking into working with some type of 3PL fulfillment partner in Japan, since all of our products come from there. And that was about like a year and a half into starting the business that we fully moved over all of our logistics and operations to Japan.
Okay. Was it difficult for you to find a partner there? I think we kind of take it for granted. There's a lot of those here in the US, but was that hard to do there?
It was definitely hard. Yeah, it was. Fortunately, I had one of my early kind of teammates was a bilingual Japanese woman here in New York City, and like I kind of tasked her with it, and she kind of just Googled around and found like 20 partners potentially. She contacted all of them. And I mean, that was the hard thing, was we were doing all of this remotely from New York at the time. Now we have an office in Tokyo that we set up about 3 years ago, and we have
Okay.
employees on the ground there. But at that time, in 2016 or 17, whatever it was, like we didn't have any of that. And so it was all done like asynchronously, like so she emailed with all of them, and eventually like kind of after explaining our business, it narrowed down to two that were able to or willing to do this. And then we decided on one of them, and sight unseen. That's the crazy thing. Like we didn't visit this 3PL. I had never met any of them. I just trusted that hopefully, generally speaking, Japanese businesses are very kind of respectful and reputable, and things like that. And so that, I mean,
Yeah.
that's how we've worked with a lot of our makers early on as well.
Hmm.
Like we hadn't met any of them. And so it was very
Hmm.
nuts that it was 2 years into the business that I actually finally, for the first time ever, met my 3PL and then met some of my makers and stuff like that.
So that turned out to be a good decision then? You're still with them today?
Yes, it's complicated, but we're actually
Okay.
potentially moving away from them next year. But they've been able to scale with us for the last 4 years now. We've been with them, and so it is thanks to them in a lot of ways, but for other reasons, we're moving to a new partner next year.
Gotcha. One of the things that I think anybody starting up a subscription business is that you've got 1,000 decisions to make, right? Everything from logistics to billing to marketing, all of that together. What was it about, using this as an example, that particular decision that you just felt comfortable enough to say, I've heard enough, let's go, I've got other fish to fry?
I mean, it was essentially, honestly, there was no choice. It was kind of like
Okay.
that. It was more
Hmm.
like we have so many things when you do, from the branding and the marketing to the content creation to just like curating, right? Like we're not a logistics business, we are a brand, we are a all these other things, right? And so eventually we just couldn't pack boxes anymore. We had to find a partner to do so. And
Hmm.
after the teammate had like talked to a whole bunch of them, like emailed with a whole bunch of them, like we only had two choices and we just went with the best one of the two. And like we were just like, let's give it a shot. What's the worst that can happen?
Hmm.
um, and so, I mean, that was a lot of the decisions early on in Bokksu, in the company, was with limited resources, limited time, limited everything. We just had to like pull the trigger on things and pray for the best, to be honest. Nowadays, we do a little bit more like comparisons and vettings and
Yeah.
trials and like all these
Right.
things. But when
Mm.
there's not much time for that, you just kind of go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that kills startup all the time, right? Is people don't appreciate that you're going to wear a lot of hats, a whole lot of hats, and you can't maybe go down that path as far as you would like, right? To vet every possible option out there and make the best possible one. Sometimes good is better than great, right? Because you can make that kind of
Yeah.
decision faster.
Yeah, I mean, as one scales, of course, great is the most important thing, right? From hiring to any type of like rollouts you do or dev work or partners you bring on. A lot of vetting is very important, but yeah, absolutely. Early on, it's just like you just got to do what you got to do to survive
Mhm.
and to keep moving forward.
Yeah. Well, now that you're growing and the product itself is a curated box of various goods from around Japan. How are you curating that today? You said you have a Tokyo office. I assume they're the ones that are going out sourcing new products for your boxes.
Yeah, so like the curation has changed quite a lot as well in the way we do it, and then it's been improved. Like it's been reiterated. We send out a monthly survey to all of our customers every single time that they get the box, so that we can see what they liked, what they don't like, and then we like use a lot of more data-driven curations nowadays. In the past, it was literally just me tasting things and deciding what goes in the box. Nowadays, there's a bit more of a process, as you can probably have assumed. We actually plan our boxes 6 months in advance. Like we're very meticulous about what goes into things. It's always curated around some type of fun cultural theme. The whole idea is that customers are learning about some aspect of Japan as they're like kind of on a monthly basis on this gourmet journey. And so we plan it very far in advance, where the team like sources and finds maybe like 20 to 25 different products and gets samples of that. And then they actually ship it over to our New York office. And we have once a month, the team here then gets together and does like a tasting day where we're tasting all of those products and we narrow it down to about like 12 to 14 unique products that go into the box. And so that's always like the funnest day for a lot of people. We get into fierce debates sometimes about which ones we like and don't like. And then now we use things like how did this product rate in a previous like last year's last year's box, or how this one is similar to this other product that got this type of
Yeah.
rating. So we use that to kind of try and curate better and better boxes every single time.
Man, I bet that does a lot for recruitment right there, right? That sounds like an awfully fun day for people to get to come in and contribute to those decisions.
Yeah. It's especially nice because the whole mission and purpose of Bokksu, from the product that we have in the box, we also have an e-commerce marketplace, and there's a lot of like content and media we put out there as well. Our whole purpose is to bridge cultures through authentic food, products, and media. And so, like sometimes when our Japanese team like kind of tastes it themselves and curates it, it doesn't necessarily appeal to a Western palate. And so that's why we need to taste it here. We got to get a mix of opinions. Got to have diverse people kind of trying it to see what will appeal to like the most people. A good example is like Japanese red bean, which is a very common and delicious dessert in Asia and Japan. Is unfortunately not that popular in the Western cultures. I think people get confused by sweet beans, and so like that's something we've learned over time. And so that's like even if some people like it, we kind of nix a lot of it from being curated into the boxes because it just is not very
Yeah.
popular.
I'm sure
Yeah.
that's a balancing act between finding something that's
Hmm.
palatable to your point, the Western consumer, but yet you're still trying to expose them to that culture, right? You're
Exactly.
wanting
Yeah.
them to try things they would ordinarily try.
That is, I mean, exactly. We're like we never put like Pocky or Japanese Kit Kats in our boxes. Like we're trying to really stay more authentic and traditional in these family businesses, but yet it has to be products that people enjoy. It is a tough balancing act, and it's just it is a very difficult job. But we've been working at this for years now, set a very high bar for ourselves, and our customers love it because of that. So.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your subscribers, your consumers here in the U.S. Or you actually said you're selling outside of the U.S. as well at this point.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does your typical subscriber look like? Are they people who are curious about Japan? Are they people who were maybe spent some time in Japan and are now here and still want, some connection there? What are you seeing?
I mean, we have a fairly kind of diverse audience of customers. Like a lot of people got surprised when they hear that 75% of our subscriber base are actually non-Asian. So it is
Okay.
certainly we're trying to. So we were like really accomplishing our mission of bridging cultures. Like Japanese expats living abroad is actually not our demographic at all. One, they don't need to learn how to discover Japan through snacks. It's like like
Hmm.
they've already are from there. And then two, it's also a very small audience. So that's not like, to me, that's not where the impact is. If you are just selling Japanese products to Japanese people is not as impactful as to me like selling it to non-Japanese people, right? Things like that. And so
Mhm.
that's been a goal we've always had, and that we're accomplishing that. In terms of within that type of demographic, it is sometimes a lot of people that are interested in Japanese culture. They visited, maybe they had a honeymoon there, and they want something to remind them every month of it. But sometimes also we get a lot of people that are just foodies that want to explore new cultures and have tastes and textures and flavors they've never had before. And because we like Bokksu isn't just something that is branded and marketed well, which is a good amount of subscription boxes. We also care a lot about what's in our box. And, like as I mentioned, since I still final taste test everything goes in a box. If it doesn't taste good, it doesn't go in. And so like that, like kind of immediately elevates it to this very, very like foodie type of paradise type of situation. So we get a lot of people that weren't previously interested in Japanese culture, but now all of a sudden they taste it. They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I do love Japanese food after all, or
Mhm.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if your subscriber gets their box and they really like something that's in it, especially if it's a foodie, do they have an opportunity to go and then go purchase more? Is that through you, or do you send them directly to the vendor?
Yeah, so that's actually something that I've been wanting to do since the beginning. And for the first 2, 3 years, we didn't have that function or feature because it's just like a whole, subscription boxes and normal e-commerce are like very different beasts. And so, but in early 2018, so about 2.5 years into first starting Baksu, we did successfully launch what we call Baksu Market. It's under the same kind of website. It's just another section of it where
Mm.
people can go and actually buy the products they tasted. And if that product does well, we keep it permanently stocked there. And that kind of part of the marketplace has grown quite a lot. Where in the beginning of 2018, it was like 20 SKUs, just all kind of like excess inventory in the box so that we can kind of, not have any waste, but also customers can buy what they liked. And that's rapidly grown over the last 3 years. And now we have close to 400 SKUs, I think maybe over 400 SKUs on there now. And it's not just snacks. It's we've expanded to have things there that we've never put in the box. We have like premium instant ramens. We have lifestyle goods. We have kitchenware. We have artisanal hand cut glassware that are like really like they're $600 each. But that's because each cup takes about a month or two to create, and it's created by like artisanal family businesses in Japan. And so
Wow.
it's like that type of stuff where it's all Japan exclusive products, and we're the only place you can purchase it. Because most of these makers, they don't know how to ship internationally. They don't understand all these like the kind of exporting type of things. And so we kind of take that all on for them as a first party buyer. And so then that is like a win-win-win all around. It creates the sustainable supply chain where we're not like taking their products and giving them a kickback. It's like we pay for the products first, we staff the inventory, and as soon as customers buy it, we ship it out right away.
Yeah. I mean, that's fantastic for them, right? They're getting exposed to a whole market that they would probably never
Yeah.
otherwise have any access to through you guys. So you're kind of distributing for them.
Yeah, for sure. That's our entire purpose is to kind of uplift and elevate their stories. That's why we also have on our website a section called Makers, where
Mhm.
a couple of years ago I went to Japan because I've been going back to Japan since 2018 for Bokksu, like every couple of months. Obviously not in the last year and a half, but like before that, pretty often. And I would meet with these makers, and they would tell me their stories of like why the fifth generation son has taken over the 120-year-old family business or something like that. And it's just like amazing because we don't have these things in America. We don't have that type of lineage. I mean, some of these makers we work with are older than America itself. Like their family businesses. Some of them are like 300 years old or something. And so it's kind of nuts when you think about that. And to hear that is just like, wow, these short stories need to be shared. So we actually, at our own kind of expense again, went and created a web series documentary featuring them, like me interviewing them in Japanese, them responding about like why they do what they do, how the rice crackers are made, et cetera, et cetera. And then we kind of just distributed that online for customers to really show that like these are the families you support when you subscribe to Bokksu.
Yeah, yeah. That's a level of engagement and interaction that you just can't get in other places. Even if you could go to Amazon and buy something from Japan, you're just not going to get that sort of,
Yeah, correct. I
experience
mean,
with the product.
Amazon's a great example of like one of the reasons we did that and invested in that because we knew there wasn't going to be a short-term return on the content we create there, and it was a
Mhm.
very expensive, like kind of investment in terms of time and whatever. Um, is that we need to differentiate from things like Amazon. Amazon is all about, it's great. We all use Amazon, right? But it's all commodities. There's
Right.
no experience, there's no story, there's no connection with the vendor. And so there's no way any of us would succeed if we're trying to compete against Amazon. So what you got to do is you got to sell a lifestyle, an experience, a brand, a culture to people, and that's what we're always trying to do at Bokksu is push those boundaries of how we, people aren't just subscribing and getting a box of snacks; they're kind of being part of this larger global community and supporting family businesses and learning about their stories and stuff like that.
Yeah. The new subscribers, the consumers that are coming to you today, where are you seeing them coming from? What sort of channels are you finding effective? And I assume word of mouth and kind of that organic channel is big for you as well. But talk about that. Where are they coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure many of your other guests have talked about this. It is a wild, wild west right now in terms of digital marketing. It's changed a lot. I mean, early on, it was like, yeah, like kind of really scrappy type of things. And then, for a good while, it was like Facebook ads, right? But now Facebook ads are not great. And we actually have like turned them off, slash, like sometimes we try them again, but it's just like become a very small part of our user acquisition just because the CACs are so out of control there. And
Mhm.
so um, currently, like right now, what still is kind of working for us is actually YouTube. We work with a lot of YouTube creators where we partner with them,
Okay.
we sponsor them, we send them product, and then they kind of like eat it while they're in their videos, where they kind of a shout out, whatever type of integration they do with their normal content. And we generally look for creators that have an audience that are interested in Asian culture or food or something along those lines, and that has become like 50% of our customer acquisition at times. And then a lot of times we then take their video content because we're contracting with them and getting kind of permission to use that specific video, and then we then cut that up into ads that we then advertise on YouTube or Facebook or other channels to get that UGC more like kind of organic feel. So those are kind of a big way for us. Other ways are, the typical kind of like search ads and Google, stuff like that, but that's always like more low intent. I mean, already high intent and the bottom of funnel. So it's always trying to get that top of funnel stuff that's hard. So we're trying to, TikTok's the big next frontier, right? That everybody's trying to get into, and we're working on that as well, but we haven't really cracked the nut on that yet.
Okay. Um, when it comes to referrals, what are you doing to incentivize that low cost channel of saying, I've got happy customers here. How do I get them to evangelize for me?
Yeah, so referrals, we're always trying to boost up more, and we've like run tests on it and all that stuff. So currently we do like a give 15 get 15 type of program. It used to be a give 10 get 10, but then we ran a test where we up to the 15. It just like worked a lot better. People were a lot more willing to
Really?
do it. And
Okay.
I mean, yes, it's a little bit more expensive on the CPA side, but then just the usage just goes up a lot more.
Right.
And we are very happy with that type of CPA. That's still pretty decent for us.
Yeah.
And so what we do, of course, besides putting it on our website, is in almost every single one of our emails that we send out, at the bottom, there's always a banner about the referral program.
Okay.
In our like, and we use Klaviyo for emails, we use Gorgeous for customer support, and also in customer support, every ticket that we respond to, automatically in the bottom too, is like, do you love Bokksu? Like, find, especially because our whole thing is that we're also offering like exceptional customer experience and service and things. And like one of our big rules is every single ticket needs to be responded to within 30 minutes, 24/7. And so like we get first response
That's
times
impressive.
really down. Sometimes it's even under 15 minutes. And so like customers are incredibly happy. We get very good CSAT scores, kind of customer satisfaction scores and stuff. And so then, we also added at the end of all those emails too, to be like, oh, if you, tell a friend, you get $15 type of thing. And so
Hmm.
just always spreading the know-how about this program.
Yeah. Well, what are you seeing in terms of retention, right? You got somebody that's probably wanting to try this, see how it goes, and then, you're wanting to hold on to them as long as you can. So what do you see in terms of lifetime value, keeping your subscriber, and what tactics do you guys have in place to keep them, to avoid churn?
Um, I mean, what do you mean by what are we seeing in terms of retention? Like, what is the
Well,
specific question?
how long your customers are staying on? I assume you're offering multiple packages, right? Is it always monthly billing, or do you do quarterly and annually as well?
Yeah, so we offer 1, 3, 6, 12 month.
Okay.
So with the prepaids, I mean, that's something I always encourage like box founders to do. It's always shocking to me when box founders don't offer it, or where they
Mhm.
only focus on the monthly. Because in our case, our average customer life is around 9 months, and it's actually continuing to improve. It used to be 8 months or 7 months, like a couple of years ago. And so we're seeing like continued improvement in retention because there's a lot we're working on to make that better. I mean, one of the big ways is honestly just the more people you push into the prepaid plans, the higher the retention. Like it sounds kind of crazy almost for some people because they're like, well, you might lower conversion rates or something, the type of thing. But we've found that to not be the case when we run our tests. But then what happens is if you're billing them only every 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, granted, it's a much larger amount. So that is a little bit shocking for some people. But because you're billing them less often, it's less likely that they're going to churn actually. Billing somebody monthly is like a monthly reminder in their statement that this is something that they're subscribing to, and that makes it a lot more likely they're it's just what we found, what I've heard from other founder friends in the subscription space. So right now about 65 or 70% of our subscriber base is on a prepaid plan. It's quite high. Like we do a lot of encouragement, like discounting, but also just like promotions around get moving people up. Like we always have a flow that goes out. If they're a monthly subscriber, like after I think their second box, it automatically triggers a email that goes to them, upselling them of like, oh, if they upgrade to a 3, 6, 12 month, they get additional savings today, type of thing.
Yeah. Well, so what does that mean for you in terms of if I purchase the annual plan, I get 6 months in? First of all, do you guys offer a refund? And then how are you dealing with that cash flow and revenue recognition on the back end? Because that gets a little more complicated. Because to your point, most aren't doing it that way.
Yeah, so I mean, in our terms and conditions, we say, once you buy this, there's no refunds of the 12
Okay.
month, the remaining months. However, I mean, obviously, we're always trying to like have this happiness guarantee for our customers, right, to make sure they're satisfied. So if there's some like valid reason for why, it can't just be like it no taste good, me no like, right? Like it has to be if it's like a valid reason. One of the big ones recently, for example, is like the EU has become incredibly difficult to ship to. Like there's all this like VAT stuff that's going on. A lot of like extra customs duty fees are getting hit on that weren't there before. And so for customers, sometimes our box is $50 a month, let's say. It gets cheaper with each. It gets as low as 40 with the 12 month. Let's say they subscribe to that, right? The 12 month. But then when their box now shows up, they're paying an additional 20 or $30 of like VAT or customs on that, which is very unreasonable. It's really annoying, and it's not our fault, but it's also not theirs. And so in those cases, if they want to, cancel refund of their remaining shipments, we allow them to do that. Just because it's like it is a lot to ask for them, and we're working on that piece now, trying to figure that out of the EU, et cetera. In terms of cash flow, well, one, it's really great for cash flow, right? Because you
Sure.
immediately realize the cash, so it allows
Yeah.
you to be in a stronger cash flow position. However, it is certainly difficult to manage. Thankfully, I have a CFO now, so he does all of
Fantastic.
that. But he frequently complains to me about how deferred revenue is one of the biggest headaches ever. But it is something that any subscription box needs to manage because I've heard horror stories of others that did not manage it properly, where they did not book it well, they did not account for it. So what ended up happening was they got all that cash flow early, they spent it all, and then when they had a slow few months, all of a sudden they ran out of cash and they like could not fulfill their like kind of commitments to their customers, and that is terrible.
Well, I mean, honestly, that's one of the things we see too on the payment processing side. We help a lot of merchants negotiate new payment processing agreements, and a lot of times in this industry, a payment processor want to slap on a reserve just for that exact reason, right? That they don't, if they shut down tomorrow and all of a sudden a whole bunch of refunds need to go out the door, they don't want to be the one holding the bag, so they want to hold back cash from the merchant, and then sometimes that's a shock, right?
No, that's actually funny that I'm smiling and laughing because we literally just dealt with that like a few months ago. We are
Oh,
trying
really?
to change processors, and the new
Hmm.
processor was like, "There's too much risk with your deferred revenue. You need to put this huge amount of money in reserve." And we're like, "No, we're not locking up $1 million. That's
Yeah,
insane."
right.
Um,
Uh-huh.
like it was, yeah, that is certainly a downside, but there are ways around that as well if one keeps growing, so it's all good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what has been the impact? You talked a little bit ago about not being able to go over to Japan and your teams go back and forth over the past 18 months. But what did the pandemic do to your business? People sitting at home, do they seem more interested in exploring something like your product?
I mean, so the pandemic has been very interesting and different for Bokksu. So at first, it was really, really bad. Like I thought, like there has been so many ups and downs. It's been kind of out of control. Like I was actually fundraising in like a very small type of round, like a pre-seed type of thing, um, when the pandemic hit, and so that was like the worst timing ever because investors all pulled out. And one even said to me in March last year, I remember like, you're going to need to pivot your business because nobody needs premium Japanese snacks during a global pandemic. And nobody knew. I didn't. It was like hard to say. Everybody was just buying toilet paper and canned beans at that time, right? And so like it was pretty scary. I thought maybe everything was going to be over, and then at the end of March, things started rising because people were realizing they're getting stuck at home, and they wanted the experiences. They wanted new flavors and tastes. They didn't want to just eat the same canned beans that they had at home, and and so
Mhm.
we did start rising up. But then in like late April, I remember the day, April 22nd, Japan Post suspended shipping to 200 countries around the world, including the US, which was like the scariest, worst day of my life. I thought
I'm
that
sure.
this business I had built for 4 years at that point, and since launch, was over. I thought that like I all of a sudden had to just call it a day because that was our carrier we used to ship everything. Like how we're going to get our products when there are no planes in the sky. I'd never made a contingency plan for no planes in the sky, and so that was pretty tough. It was about a few weeks that it took me to find an alternative shipping solution to allow me to keep shipping my boxes from Japan to the US. And then, but once I solved that, which then took another couple months to smooth out the process, um, our sales just started skyrocketing. Like, because
Mhm.
we were the only provider that still were offering like free shipping from Japan. We were kind of getting people things that they definitely couldn't experience now because they couldn't even travel to Japan. And a year and a half later, you still can't. Nobody's been able to travel to Japan as a tourist for 18 months or more, however long it's been. It's kind of nuts. And so our business has it actually tripled from the beginning of COVID to the end of last year.
Wow.
It was crazy. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then it just came, that type of scaling came with all sorts of other issues that happened. But yeah, it was, in terms of growth, that was good.
Well, at least those are good problems, right? Those are the ones
Yes.
you
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
or are motivated to solve. Well, I'm curious also, was there any uptick you guys saw because of the Olympics?
A little bit, not a whole ton actually. Strangely enough,
Okay.
I mean, unfortunately, I think people like this was the least watched Olympics in the history of Olympics, I think, from what I remember reading. I think people probably had a lot other stuff going on in their minds during this year. We were really hoping pre-pandemic, Olympics was happening last year, that that would have been a huge groundswell, right? Like everybody would be talking about Tokyo Olympics, be trying to go there. All these visits, I think there were like the original forecast was like 50 million visitors to Japan during the Olympics. That like it would have been out of control great because people would have gone there, tasted the food, and they wanted to get more sent back to them. We even had like a bunch of corporate orders that were potentially going to come in, etc. I was potentially going to be flown over to do like an interview with some. It was anyway, it is what it is. And so nobody's crying over spilt milk, right? But so maybe there was a tiny bit of uplift, but not really. And the biggest uplift we saw was from corporate gifting. So we've expanded to have more of a corporate gifting program now, where every a lot of employees are working remotely and they want to do something to bring people together. So now like we just have an inbound page essentially on our website where like if corporates if they find us they can put in a submit a form and then we help them create some type of experience for them and their employees. And so there's a little bit more of that leading up to the Olympics. Yeah.
You got that. Any new product lines, ways of delivering? You talked about the e-commerce marketplace. What's next for you guys?
Yeah. So like what's kind of, and this is something I've always planned from the beginning if things went well, which things did, fortunately, just, there were a lot of hard work and feeling like we're about to fail any moment and sleepless nights, but was Baksu. That word itself literally just means box in Japanese. And so we're not necessarily tied only to snacks, even though it is a curated Japanese snack box. The whole idea is that it is like literally metaphorically this box that can be delivered to you, that it kind of connects you to Japan and unboxes this whole experience. And so we have Bokksu Box, and now we have Bokksu Markets as of 3 years ago. And what's super duper exciting that we're launching in Q4 is going to be actually this is probably the first time I'm talking about it with anybody is because we're still kind of testing on it, but with just it's going to launch quite soon. Is it's going to be a US based business, so kind of bringing back some of the operations here, but it's going to be America's first online Japanese Asian grocery delivery service called Bokksu Grocery. Especially because nowadays people are very used to having groceries delivered to them, and this does
Right.
not exist currently in America, which is kind of crazy. So kind of going beyond kind of snacks in a box, which is always going to be a good way of hooking people in, and then like kind of buying these artisanal marketplace items but are quite expensive because they ship directly from Japan. So the global shipping is just like out of control right now, as I'm sure a lot of people are talking about in terms of pricing. But what we're doing is instead for Box Grocery, kind of buying from the import wholesalers and then kind of stocking them here and then delivering them to people's doors all throughout the country, of like pantry items, like instant noodles, dry goods, rice, like starting non-perishable first and introducing eventually some like frozen and alcohol and things like that to kind of really expand and become everyday products in people's lives in their pantries. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds awfully interesting, but also uh, a lot of logistics, I'm sure, to figure out there
Yes,
as well.
yes. I mean, even though I mentioned our whole mission and our purpose, it is what it is. But sometimes in my mind, Bokksu is what we really are is a global logistics company that just knows how to move product from place to place in an efficient way and get it into people's hands with really nice
Yeah.
branding on top of it. Is what it feels like at times, to be honest.
Well, that is honestly a very big part of it. I mean, that's what you're selling. That's something not anybody can go do easily, and you guys seem to have
Right.
built those systems. So, yeah, I mean, I first of all, Danny, really enjoyed the conversation, learning about the company and all that has gone into you guys getting to this point. I mean, congratulations on all the growth over 6 years. But if there's any questions that the listeners had today that they maybe want to ask you, how can they get in contact with you? And then, of course, give us the Bokksu website.
Yeah, I mean, so our website is bokksu.com. It's Bokksu. If you can also just Google that; it'll come up right away. And in terms of getting in contact, you can find me on LinkedIn. Probably the first person who comes up. I have a pretty rare last name, so Danny Taing, Taing. They can connect with me there. They should leave a little message that they found me here, so I know that's not some random person.
Yeah, that's always a good
Yeah.
idea. Right. Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Danny. Really enjoyed the conversation today, and best of luck to you guys.